The transmission came in on every open channel simultaneously. Every human frequency, every civilian band, every military trunk line, every emergency beacon wavelength we had ever used. It lasted 41 seconds, no translation lag, no diplomatic preamble. The Varrock Dominion had learned our languages before they bothered to speak to us, which told you everything about how they regarded the exchange. I was 3 hours into a double shift in the analysis bay aboard ISV Ashground when the signal hit. We all heard it through the ship's intercom because Commander Velt had ordered it, broadcast station-wide, either out of respect for the crew's right to know, or out of a cold desire to make sure every one of us understood what had just been said. The voice was smooth, almost musical, with a register that sat slightly outside the range of comfortable human hearing, designed that way, I suspected later, to produce a low-level unease in every listener, a frequency chosen to make us feel smaller before the words even resolved into meaning. The message was simple. All human-inhabited worlds, stations, and vessels were to extinguish their active power grids within 72 standard hours. Weapon systems first, then drive cores, then life support to minimal survival thresholds. In exchange, the Varrock Dominion would permit human biological continuation under a restructured resource arrangement to be detailed at a later date. Non-compliance would be answered by demonstration. The transmission gave coordinates for the demonstration site. The coordinates were Callaway's Rest. I had been to Callaway's Rest once, on a transit layover 4 years prior. It was a mid-tier agricultural colony, third-generation settlement, 10,000 people living in low prefab townships across a wide amber plain. They grew grain and raised livestock and repaired the same farm equipment their grandparents had brought out on the original colony ships. They had a small school, a medical station, 2 taverns, a repair yard, and very little else. They were not a military installation. They were not a strategic target by any definition that would hold up to scrutiny. They were 14,000 people who farmed a plane and went to sleep each night under unfamiliar stars. The demonstration took 7 minutes. I watched the sensor relay. I watched the Varrock orbital platforms come to position above Callaway's Rest and discharge what their own technical literature called an atmospheric suppression array, a device that interrupted the ionization layer of a planet's upper atmosphere, and then drove the disruption downward in a spiral pattern until all electrical activity at the surface, biological and mechanical, ceased. It looked, sensor display, like a slow dimming. Like watching a city's lights go out one district at a time from a great distance. Except it was not lights. It was everything that ran on a current. It was every heart. 14,000 people, 7 minutes. The Dominion follow-up transmission arrived 11 minutes after the last sensor reading from Callaway's Rest went flat. They reiterated the 72-hour deadline. They expressed in the same smooth musical register he described as regret for the necessity of the demonstration. And they noted that the response to non-compliance at the remaining 307 human-inhabited worlds would be proportional and efficient. Commander Velt did not respond to that transmission. No one in the human sphere responded. The 72-hour clock ran, and then it ran out. I was still in the analysis bay when the Ember fleet assembled. It took 11 days to bring them all in. I watched the formation codes populate on the tactical board one column at a time, each code representing a warship, each column representing a strike group, each strike group reporting its readiness, state, and holding position at the assembly coordinates outside. Varrock controlled space. By the 7th day there were more columns than the standard display could render at its default resolution. I reduced the scale to fit them. 5,216 warships. I had pulled every available record on the Varrock Dominion in those 11 days. Not because anyone had assigned me the task, because understanding them was the only thing I could think to do with my hands that was not useless. The Dominion was old. 3,000 years of continuous recorded expansion, 41 subject species, a political architecture that had calcified into ritual somewhere around the 800-year mark. They had not fought a peer adversary in over a millennium. Their military doctrine was built entirely on the assumption of overwhelming technological advantage and the psychological impact of demonstration strikes against populations unable to respond in kind. They had done this before. many times. The 41 subject species were not allies. They were evidence. What the Dominion had not done, in 3,000 years of this practice, choose a target that hit back. There was no ultimatum from our side, no counter-transmission, no diplomatic contact of any kind. The Ember fleet had assembled under full communications blackout. No outbound signal of any type, nothing that the Dominion's listening arrays could interpret as a reply, a negotiating position, or a threat. When the fleet moved, it moved in silence. The Dominion's first indication that anything had changed was the mass gravity signature of 5,000 warships dropping out, transit at the edge of the Vorak home system simultaneously. I was on the bridge for the arrival. Velt had cleared a station for me. Not standard practice for an analyst, but this was not a standard operation. Through the forward viewport, Vorak Prime was a pale ochre crescent in the distance, its dayside catching the light of a yellow-white sun, its orbital stations still blinking in their regular rhythms. They had not gone to battle stations. The gravity signature of the fleet's arrival would have reached their sensors 30 seconds ago. 30 seconds was not enough time to do anything about 5,000 warships. The Dominion's broadcast channel opened. The same smooth voice. It asked, in what I recognized as a register calibrated to project authority rather than urgency, what our intentions were. No one answered. The fleet's first wave was already moving. I am an analyst. I am not a weapons officer. I did not give orders and I did not fire anything. What I did was watch, because watching and recording was what I was there to do, and because someone had to be able to say precisely and clearly what had happened, and in what order and with what deliberateness, so that the record would be accurate, and the weight of it would be carried in the exact proportions it deserved to be carried. The Vorak orbital platforms, the same platforms that had been positioned above Alloway's rest, were the first priority targets. The fleet took them methodically, beginning with the outermost defensive ring and working inward. There was no wasted fire. The strike groups had been assigned to sectors before the fleet ever left the assembly point. Every ship knew its targets. Every weapon was fired with purpose. The Vorak defense network was substantial by any standard other than the one currently being applied to it. It performed about, as well as an 800-year-old doctrine, performs against an enemy that has just spent 11 days doing nothing but calculating how to dismantle it. The broadcast channel stayed open through most of it. The voice changed register several times. It asked questions. It made offers. At one point, it used a word that our translation matrix flagged with low confidence, but rendered as supplication. The fleet did not alter its firing schedule. By the time the innermost defense ring was gone, the day side of Vorak Prime was visible from the bridge without magnification. The atmospheric particulates from the platform debris catching the sunlight in a way that made the upper air shimmer in long horizontal bands. It was, objectively, a clear day on that world. I noted it in the log because I noted everything, and because it seemed important to record that this had happened in broad daylight, deliberately and without ambiguity, and not in some night-shrouded hour that could later be described as something other than what it was. The broadcast channel went silent at some point during the final phase. I do not have the exact timestamp in my notes because I was not watching the channel by then. I was watching the sensor feed, and I was writing. The analytical record needed to be accurate. The analytical record needed to be complete. When it was over, Commander Velt stood at the viewport for a long time without speaking, closed my log, ran the word count, corrected 2 transcription errors, and saved the file. The 41 subject species of the Vorak Dominion received copies of the sensor record within the hour, along with a single-line transmission. Did not threaten them. It did not make demands. It stated one fact in present tense. Humanity's response to the destruction of Callaway's Rest was now complete. I do not know what those species did with that information. I do not know what they thought, or how they described it to each other, or what conclusions they drew about the humans who had spent 11 days assembling 5,000 warships in total silence before using them without. What I know is that the broadcast channel never opened again. 14,000 people on an amber plane, 7 minutes. Now they knew what 7 minutes cost.